So this is the second part of the video series about playing with the hanging pawns. So this part will be specifically about playing against the hanging pawns this time. So we're going to be looking at two more games with my friend Attila Turzo, who's an international master from Hungary. So I'll be presenting my side about what I know about playing against the hanging pawns, but then Attila will be showing you the games about how it actually is done. So what I know about playing against hanging pawns, you want to go with an endgame. So if you trade queens, it'll be beneficial for the side that is not the hanging pawns. And also maybe investing the pawns prematurely. With that said, now my friend Attila Turzo will be presenting you two instructional games.
Okay, hello everyone, hello friends again. We will see two games about hanging pawns and how to play against the hanging pawns. Yeah, one key idea, and actually which will be one of the theme of this first game would be how we try to fix the hanging pawns if it's possible, and then use them as a target. And if we can go sometimes to a favorable endgame where we can win them, or maybe creating another weakness because the opponent just is too much focused on the defense of the weak hanging pawns, then we can gain another advantage. Okay, let's look at the first game, which was played by Rubinstein with the white pieces against Saba. It's played long time ago. It was 1908. But as we can see, also in those old masters were kind of good in positional chess. So it started with d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, the queen's gambit declined, and here played c5. In those times, the Tarrasch defense was kind of popular, actually popularized by the doctor himself, Dr. Tarrasch, who played a lot and he got a lot of followers. So c5, yeah, black immediately attacks the white center, would like to play and get active counterplay. So c5, c takes d5, e takes d5. Actually, one of the best way to deal with this variation to try to fix the center with white and then create actually an isolated pawn later on d5 by capturing on c5, or allowing the black c5 pawn to capturing on d4, and then the d5 pawn can be a nice target for in the future for white. Knight f3, knight c6, g3 comes, knight f6, bishop g2. Okay, so normally this is one of the most aggressive setup against the Tarrasch defense. The bishop, develop the bishop to g2 because this directly points to this hopefully later target d5 pawn. Yeah, here there are several ways to play for black. Actually, bishop e7 is the classical main line. Bishop e7, castle, castle, bishop g5, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and we got that structure playing against this isolated pawn. Or possible to capture also on d4, knight takes d4. And here black actually immediately wanted to increase the pressure on the d4 square, played queen b6. Also in kind of in the modern play, Dubov, the Russian top player, plays the idea of bishop c5, knight b3, bishop b6, very aggressive play, and even sacrificing the d5 isolated pawn for active counterplay. So that's always in the mind of the player with the weak pawn, also with the isolated pawn or with the hanging pawns, to sacrifice a pawn for activity. So that you should always be in mind when you play with those pawns, how you can play actively, how you can create activity. And also if you play against those pawns, how you can prevent the opponent's activity, or how to be ready to deal with if he makes some active moves. That's very important. Look always the possibility of the pushing all those pawns, or also the possibility of the sacrificing those pawns. But let's go back to the game. So actually with this queen b6, black provocates white to capturing on c6 and creates hanging pawns. which, there are also an advantage for black in this situation, because then there is no more isolated pawn on d5, so that's not weak anymore, but now we got these hanging pawns on c6 and d5. So also the advantage of the hanging pawns, they can actually support each other. So that's not always bad when one of the pawns are moved forward, because sometimes they just one of them is moving forward. Like example, in this kind of position, black can play c5 and c4. Sometimes that's a typical idea. The d5 pawn will be like a good target for white, but because the c4 pawn, that would fix the white's b2 pawn. So over on the b5, black may get to counterplay against the b2 pawn. Okay, let's look how it continues. So castled, bishop e7. Okay, so black has managed to unite his pawns with like c6 and d5, but at the cost of time and development. Yeah, he is yet to castle, and the c5 square is weak. So that's the square which towards white will direct the power and the attack. White would like to actually get control of the c5 square to fix the c6 pawn, to avoiding him to want to advance to c5 and c4. And then would be a clear strategy for white, try to attack that c6 pawn and try to win it. So knight a4. Also actually the knight a4 has also the advantage was to defending the b2 pawn, which is on the half open file. Many times actually that's the target for black, or the player with the hanging pawns. Bishop e3, one more piece developed and controlling the c5 square, castling, and rook c1. Rook c1, yeah, just make sure that pawn cannot be pushed. Bishop g4, so black tries to get some active counterplay, and here, yeah, white can deal with this two different ways. The game was played f3, which is a little bit kind of strange looking move, but later he made the maneuver playing rook to f2 and then bishop f1, moving the e pawn to e3, and then get back to that rook to the game with rook to c2. Other possibility would be like just maybe rook e1 to protect the pawn this way. F3, bishop went back to e6. Okay, here comes another important idea about how you play against the hanging pawns, especially when there is this phase when one of them moved already, and you can use that square which became weak, like the c5 square, between those pawns. So if there is a piece which protects that one, like is the e7 bishop, we try to exchange that piece so that the weakness of that pawn will be even more clear. Rook f8, rook f2, knight d7, bishop takes e7, rook takes e7. Again, black is ready to push actually the pawn to c5 and get like a playable position. So it's really important to play queen d4 to cover the c5 square. Okay, here rook e8 was played in the game, but one other idea how you can defend better when you play, like if you play this position with black, you should try to play most time a5 is really important. Yeah, example like after rook c8, if white captures the pawn, even after c5, black has some counterplay because the queen on a7 is kind of looks strange. Also the f2 bishop. So instead of this, probably white would just play here knight to c5 to keep everything under control. But still, the idea to play a5 comes like even after here, bishop f1, so it's ready to play e3 or e4, and here a5. This would be it would be much better than the game actually. It gives reasonable good defending chances for black because it prevents the b4 move, which would fix the c6 weakness. Plus also several times the b2 pawn can be a target. So if ever the knights will be exchanged, then and white plays something like b3, then black can play a4 to exchange that pawn and then try to create a isolated pawn also for white. But he did not play. Again, the theme of this game was again kind of like the passive defense, which is we talked about. It's not a good idea. Always try to play actively, make active defense also, if possible, looking for active possibilities to counterplay. e3, yeah, the queen needs to move, queen b7, knight c5, rook takes c5. And looks like that blockade and the pressure on the c6 pawn just increasing move by move. And here again, the right move would be to play a5, the last, maybe the final moment when black could get still probably a playable position, playing a5. And with the idea of to make this white b pawn a future target, a possible target. a4. Even this is also an interesting possibility to sacrifice one of the weak pawn, the backward pawn, for activity. This is just a line I analyzed, little interesting line. With d4, look. So black is down a pawn, but his pieces became so active. To d4, the f3 pawn is hanging, and if playing e4, then wins back the a2 pawn. With captures on d4, then queen takes f3. We died of bishop h, d4, d5. So white is up a pawn, but black's activity may compensate it. So we should try to avoid this kind of thing. So if possible, we try to win only the pawn if we can really block the counterplay. So here rook c7 continued the passive defense. Then rook fc2, increasing the pressure, queen b6, and then b4. You know, the plan is to actually play b5 to increase the pressure and then try to win the c6 pawn. Okay, a6. Okay, this offers another important idea. You know, the pawns around weak squares become weak and shaky as time passes, and weaknesses multiply. Okay, so it's like here you look also not on the c5 square, but now the a5 square became weak, the pawn, not on the c6 pawn, but the a6 pawn. So we need to try to increase the end, try to make more and more weaknesses, but also if we are defending, we try to avoid that. Okay, rook a5, rook b8. Yeah, here probably the best defense would be just queen b7 to avoid the exchange of the queens. Because as we said, most time the endgames are even worse for the player with the hanging pawns, especially when they are fixed. After rook b8, it should be one nice little move which makes the game increase the advantage to winning, like a3. Just protect all the kind of counterplay. We don't want to capture like on a6 and winning the pawn. Again, the same idea. We don't want to win too quickly the pawn because then black gets activity for the pawn, which makes the position maybe even close to equal. So we want to win the pawn and keep the activity, keep the things under control. a3, rook a7. And here comes the final nice little combination. Please pause the video and try to find it yourself. So here we are, white captured actually the c6 pawn because the black queen is overloaded, cannot protect the pawn on c6 and the a7 rook. So capture this one, then white captures the other one. And as you see, white won the pawn and kept his activity. That's really important. And still here, how to win this game is still he plays very solidly, nicely. You know, king f2 to protect that e3 pawn, which can be a weakness. Bishop e2, avoiding the second rank checks. g6, then queen d6. You know, ready to activate the rook and also prevent all the counterplay again on the c file. Queen b7. h4, just fixing also the king side. After a5, you know, black tries to generate some kind of counterplay. Rook c7 and then b5. So just stop also that one. So don't allow the opponents to get like an open fight for the rook. And now just use the extra pawn for winning the game. And after b7, yeah, black resigned because yeah, rook c8 is kind of unavoidable. Okay, let's look one more game. Actually, one more game from Bobby Fischer, actually from the very famous game and from the very famous match against Spassky. They played for the World Championship in 1972. This was game 6. They played this in Iceland and Reykjavik. Yeah, Fischer played this kind of like one of the surprising opening. He played c4. Usually Fischer played e4, but here he surprised Spassky with c4 to play a different strategy. c4, e6, knight f3, d5, d4. Actually, they transposed Queen's Gambit decline. And this will be interesting because if you look the previous part of this lesson where we looked the game between Korchnoi and Karpov, where Karpov played the same opening with black and played with the hanging pawns, we look how can we handle differently with the white pieces. Knight f6, knight f3, knight c3, bishop e7, bishop g5, castling e3, h6, bishop h4, b6. Again, the Tartakower defense. Here in the other game, Korchnoi played bishop e2 and bishop b7 was played, but here Fischer immediately captured actually on d5 to try to block in the position, block the b7 bishop. Spassky captured with the knight, knight takes d5, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, knight takes d5, e takes d5. Also, here you can look one of the strategy against playing against the hanging pawns to try to go to the direction of the endgame. So normally exchanging like one or two pair of pieces can be many times favorable for the player who plays against the isolated pawn. Also against the isolated pawn actually, but also against playing against the hanging pawns. So rook c1, immediately putting pressure against those pawns. e6. Like example, like queen b4 check, queen d2. Yeah, this endgame would be favorable for white because then the c6 pawn would be already under big pressure. Bishop e6 just protecting the d5 pawn and putting the bishop to that where it has a little bit more potential than on b7. Queen a4, c5, queen a3. So, of course, white was ready and was knowing like black wants to play c5. So when he planned this maneuver with the queen, but as you look, putting the hanging pawns under pressure. So that's first important idea. Try to putting them under pressure. So actually they are not yet hanging pawns, but any time can be after d takes c5, b takes c5. Rook c8, bishop b5, kind of like a provocative move. As we see this also in the game, it was Garry Kasparov against Lajos Portis. There, the bishop b5 move provocated the c6 move. Here it provocated the a6 move. Actually, in this position, probably queen b7 would be a better move, which was played later in another game by Tim Geller against Tim Mann. Just a little idea to show another situation when the hanging pawns appear and they can be active. Like this is actually very temporary, actually, the existence of the hanging pawns here because it's an immediate pawn sacrifice. But it gives very, very active game for black because white cannot castle and that creates really real problems. g4, rook g1, and look d4 again. Another very aggressive handling of this kind of structure. When you have weak pawns, many times you use them to break actually the pawn structure of the opponent even by sacrifice. or you use them to open up the space, diagonals, and files for your own pieces. So this would be a more active way to deal with the situation, but here played a6 Spassky instead. This is the moment to make the hanging pawns. D takes c5, b takes c5, castling. Yeah, the b5 bishop cannot be captured because the rook is hanging on a8. Here again, probably queen b7 would be the more natural way to develop, and then later maybe push the a pawn to like a5, a4. But here rook a7 was played, bishop e2, knight d7. Okay, so here still the c5 pawn is under pressure and actually is pinned. Knight d4, interesting and strong idea. So the importance of when we want to exchange, as you said, as we said many times, we want to increase our advantage, like well-timed exchanges against the hanging pawns and go to the direction of a good endgame. Yeah, knight d4, this is I think a good idea to go for the bishop on e6 and try to maybe play a little bit more open position. Probably knight f6 would be the best move here, because that's just a very natural and good square for the knight, countering also to e4 center square. Yeah, queen f8 was played to. You wanted to release the pressure on the c5 pawn, so that now it's not pinned anymore because the queen is protected. Knight takes e6. So we transfer the situation now. We cannot say like those are hanging pawns, or like it would be like, would say like the 3 pawns, the bigger hanging pawns, like now 3 pawns hang in the middle. But actually, so the structure changed, but still has some characteristic of the hanging pawns. Here, e4 was very nice and I think very good move. To provocating, if it exchanged, then it would be, then all pawns will be isolated and good targets. Probably c4 would be the best move here to play. Still, white would play queen h3 and try to attack the e6 pawn and have some initiative. But those pawns, then the bishop actually, which is important idea of playing c4, not like d4 like in the game, that c4, d4, d5 setup limits the possibility of the light square bishop because covering the d3 square. Plus after c4 also the b2 pawn can be more likely to target like rook b7 or rook b8. And here actually white immediately, yeah, the pawns are actually blocked now, so he cannot really be used, and white can build up an attack on the king side. f4, he has the pawn majority there, queen e7, e5, fixing the e6 pawn, rook b8, bishop c4. So actually now the focus moves to the king side. The hanging pawns has no more potential to cause any problems for white. They are just blocked there, and white can use his extra pawn on the other side to generate attack. King h8, queen h3, knight f8. Yeah, there's a big difference of the knight and the bishop. Yeah, the bishop is much more active and it has a multi-purpose piece like blocking the pawns and attacking the e6 weakness. b3, a5, and now white just decided to go and increase his control over the squares on the king side. Rook c f1, queen d8, queen g3. Yeah, going out of this knight g5. Tempo moves h4, rook b7, e6, gaining more space. Rook b7, rook bc7, queen e5. Just total domination of the squares. When you have so many squares controlled, so you have much better placed pieces. Many times it appears you will have some kind of combinations possible. So, and the energy transfers to material. So queen e8, a4. Yeah, just blocking all the counterplay, queen d8. And here, yeah, slowly he tries to increase even the piece power. Rook f1 to f2, queen d8, yeah, black just waits, rook f3, queen d8. Yeah, and here he realized the winning plan is to reposition the bishop and looking for the king. Bishop d3, queen e8, queen e4. The threat is to play rook f8, check 2 times and then queen h7, checkmate, knight f6. And please pause the video here and try to find a strong move for white which actually transform his power and transfer to something bigger. So the move is rook takes f6, actually destroying the defense of the black king. King g8, bishop c4, h8 and queen f4, the final attacking move with the idea of rook f8. Plus also the h6 is hanging, so there's no defense here. Spassky resigned. So as we looked in this game, white successfully blocked those pawns, blocked their mobility, and then he could focus on the other side to focus his attacking chances and win the game on the other side. Hope you got some few ideas which you will be able to use in your own games. Yeah, which is very important. Try to put into practice all the knowledge which you gained and win some nice games.